Hi, I'm Day Day Wilson, and I'm going to show you how to make chocolate chip cookies. Okay, did I lose you? I know, not the most exciting recipe in the world, you think, but I have some tips and tricks to bring to you that maybe you haven't heard about yet, and they're going to make the best chocolate chip cookies ever. Now, first of all, the chocolate. You could certainly get big bulk chocolate, higher end gourmet chocolate, and chunk it up yourself. But I wanted to go with a supermarket brand, and I wanted to have that classic chip shape. And I just wanted to point out that the Ghirardelli 60% chips are my favorite supermarket chip. These are great. The chocolate is really dark and rich tasting. The size of the chips are slightly larger than what you might be used to. So grab a couple of bags of those and you'll be good to go. The other thing you need to know is that this chocolate chip cookie recipe, which has been making the rounds for a few years in the New York Times, online, some people refer to it as the 3-day chocolate chip cookie. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to be working and slaving away for 3 days, but what it does mean is that after we've made the batter, it's actually going to sit in the refrigerator for 3 days. And what happens is the moisture from the eggs and the butter and the flour absorbs the moisture. It affects the texture in a really positive way, and it seems to bring out the sort of caramely tones from the brown sugar, and it just makes that chocolate chip cookie that much better. Other than that, it's a pretty typical recipe where you're creaming butter and sugar together, which brings me to my 5-quart KitchenAid mixer. This is my favorite mixer that I use in my recipe testing for my books and here on the set at Bakepedia. And the one with the glass bowl, I mean, for our purposes, for filming things for you and videotaping things for you, it certainly allows us access to show you what's going on in the bowl. But the other reason why I love the glass bowl is because it just has this kind of retro feel to it, and yet here is this workhorse of my kitchen, and I love the combination of that. And the spout comes in handy too when we have things that we want to pour. So as I mentioned, we're going to be doing the creaming method of creaming together butter and sugar. And for that, you are going to use what KitchenAid refers to as the flat paddle. This paddle is specifically designed for creaming ingredients together. We're not adding air, like if we're making meringue or whipped cream, in which case you use the balloon whip. You're creaming. And the shape of the flat paddle is going to do that action for you. Make it easier for you in the kitchen, more enjoyable, and get the job done. This is the plastic coated one that comes with the mixer, but you can also order one that is all metal, and this is the one that I really like the most, and so that's the one that I have on my mixer. So we're going to start. Now, you can possibly already see I've got, I'm making this as easy for you as possible. We have unsalted butter in there. We already have brown sugar and white sugar in there with the butter. Because the mixer is so strong, I'm going to cream those all together at once. So, ingredients are in the bowl, flat paddle is attached. Down it goes. You want to make sure that you lock the head down. So that's over here. And then the speed controls are on this side of the machine. You always want to start out slowly because you don't want to have any explosion of ingredients all over your table. And then once it gets going a little bit, we can increase. Got to scrape down some of that. Oh, it did it for me. The butter should be room temperature, and once the butter is starting to break down and get cut into the sugars a little more, I'm going to turn up the sound. This makes a really large batch, and the 5-quart bowl is going to be able to handle it very easily. If you were doing this with a hand mixer, it would take you a lot longer. So the stand mixer is really helpful when you're making large batches of things. Now, occasionally a recipe will recommend that you scrape down the sides of the bowl halfway through mixing. In this case, when you're using the stand mixer, always stop the machine first, unlock, and you can bring the mixer up and out. The tilt head gives you a lot of accessibility into the bowl. So what scraping down the sides of the bowl means is simply take a spatula. I like using an extra large rubber spatula for this purpose. And you're scraping down, it's just like what it sounds like. You're scraping down the ingredients from the sides of the bowl and bringing them to the center so that when I re-engage the mixer, the flat paddle, it'll be able to get at the ingredients. There we go. Leave as much of the ingredients in there as possible. And then back down, lock, and we'll go one more time around. The recipe calls for large eggs. Always use the size egg that's called for. If you come across a baking recipe that doesn't specify and it just says 2 eggs, assume large. So I have my large eggs and they're at room temperature, and that's so that they incorporate into the cookie dough better than if they were ice cold. I'm also going to add them one at a time. And the creaming action, the butter and the sugar was creamed so well that it was light and fluffy. Now I've added an egg. I beated it enough so that the egg was incorporated before adding the second egg. Now at this point, look at the texture that we have here is soft and light and fluffy, and that's because the creaming action of the flat paddle has done such a good job. I'm going to beat in vanilla, pure vanilla extract always. And now my dry mix. Now, in addition to the recipe chilling in the refrigerator for 3 days, there's a little trick with the flour. I have 2 flours here. I have a cake flour, which is a very soft flour, and a bread flour, which is a stronger flour. In bake speak, that means it has a higher protein. So I actually have a flour that is lower in protein than all-purpose, and I have one that's higher in protein than all-purpose. And blended together, it's going to give the cookies this interesting chew that you wouldn't necessarily get if you were just using all-purpose. Now, let me just say right now, I think that there are many chocolate chip cookie recipes that are fabulous, and I'm always interested in collecting more. I'm not telling you this is the best. I'm telling you that it is really, really good. The best is up to your palate. But this one I love because I think the textures and the flavors are just exceptional. So we have 2 different kinds of flour. I already measured them out. I'm going to whisk them together along with my baking soda, which is already measured out. And a little bit of salt. I'm going to whisk that around. Now it's ready to go in. So I'm going to unlock, tilt back, and I'm going to use, it's okay if your spatula has some dough on it because it's all going in there. And I'm going to add the flour in a few different batches. Don't have to measure here, just get about half of it in, and let me start incorporating that. Turn it on low, especially after you add flour because you don't want it to puff back. Just enough so that the dough grabs the flour. And now I'm going to get the rest in. Now, as with most baked goods, you don't want to overmix. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to bring it together almost until the flour is incorporated, and then I'm going to add my chocolate chips and then finish the mixing. All right, stop at that point. Now, the chocolate chips, I mentioned to you that I like to use this 60% chocolate chip. And you're going to need, these are 10-ounce bags. You're going to need 2 of these bags, but let me show you a trick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add all of one bag. And then I'm going to add, oh, that one's for me. No, I won't eat it. It's all right. We'll put it in. I'm going to add almost 3/4 of this bag, or about 3/4 of this bag. And you can do this by eye. And you're going to see what happens later with the ones that I'm reserving. So you can pulse and just bring in those chocolate chips just until they're mixed together. And then that's it. So at this point, you want to, we're going to scrape down all of that so it's in the bowl, cover it with plastic wrap, and we're going to refrigerate it for 3 days. This is the part where you have to be patient. We've had our cookie dough resting in the refrigerator for 3 days. I scraped it into a big piece of plastic wrap, and here it is. And so now it's ready for us to dole out. Now again, the wait time is going to help with the texture of these cookies. They're going to be a little chewy on the inside, crispy on the outside, just the way I like them. The other thing that's going to make the texture of these cookies great is the blend of our flours. Our cake flour, which is King Arthur unbleached, has a 9.4 protein content. That is a very soft flour. And then we have a higher 12.7 protein content bread flour. Again, both unbleached, going to have exquisite taste and add texture to these cookies. So here we have our refrigerated dough. Now the size of the cookie is going to make a difference. You might think, well, I want mine big, I want mine small, but we're going for about a 3-inch cookie size. And that's because when they bake in the oven, it's also going to give, there's going to be enough surface area so that the edges are a little crispier and the center is a little chewier. So the size of the cookie actually does make a difference to the final product. So I have a scale here. I'm going to show you 2 ways to get the cookie onto the pan. You can take a 1/4 cup measuring cup, or if you have an ice cream scoop that's a similar size, you could use that as well. And our cookie dough is nice and cold, and I'm going to pack it in to the 1/4 cup measurer because this is the size that I want. And then using a butter knife or an icing spatula is the easiest way to get it out onto the pan. Now, you might want to just round it out a little bit. Now, I know that looks really big, but that's the size that we want so that we get about a 3-inch cookie. Now, the other thing that you can do if you have a scale, and you should have a scale in your kitchen if you bake a lot, is you're going for, oh, God, I'm so good, a 2-ounce, well, it was 2 1/4, 2 1/8, excuse me. I'm going to take off 1 chip. Perfect. You're going for a 2-ounce ball. So that's another way to do it. Now, this is a sheet pan, a rimmed sheet pan. It's sturdy. It's going to conduct heat evenly. I have it lined with parchment paper, which is what we need to not only help release the cookies easily, but it's also going to keep our pan clean. It's my favorite way to bake cookies. And we're only going to put 6 cookies on this tray. So you will need a few trays going for this very big batch of chocolate chip cookies. 2 ounces. So we're going to do 2 across, 3 down, 2 ounce each, or 1/4 cup measure. Then, remember those extra chocolate chips I had you saved before? They're about to come into play. Perfect. We have our 6 cookies out on our tray, and we're not going to flatten them. We're going to leave them as is. When they bake in the oven, they'll flatten on their own. Now, the extra chocolate chips, this is a food styling technique, and I learned it when I was on my very first photo shoot years ago, and it's something that I do all the time now because it's easy. It takes a little time, but it's easy. So here are our cookies. I'm going to take some extra chocolate chips, and I'm actually just going to put them on the cookie, kind of random here and there, maybe 4 or 5 extra. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do 4 of them, and then I'm going to leave 2 unstyled, and you'll be able to see what this does. You know when you buy like a, well, Some people buy boxes of cookies at the supermarket, and you know the cookie on the package looks like it's bursting with chips, and then when you actually get the cookie inside the bag, it doesn't look anything like the picture. So what's happened for that photograph is a food stylist has styled the cookies, and this is what they've done. They've put extra chocolate chips or nuts or whatever it is on the outside of the cookie, and when the cookie's baked, it's going to look like it's bursting with chips. So these are ready to go. We have a 350 oven waiting for our cookies. I'm going to get these in the oven, and I'll show you what they look like when they're done. One more thing. Coarse salt. There's going to be a teeny weeny little sprinkle of coarse salt on the top of each of these. Maybe you've been familiar with sort of the new craze of salt and sweet or salt in sweet goods. If you haven't, then you're in for a treat. It really accentuates the sweetness. If you know what I'm talking about, you'll like the tip. So I'll go put these in the oven. The cookies have baked for about 15 to 20 minutes. What you want to look for is a little more golden brown around the edges, but they should still be soft in the middle. And it is very important that you don't over bake them or they won't have that chewiness in the center. Really, a 30-second to 1 minute difference can make the difference between a chewy chocolate chip cookie and a crunchy chocolate chip cookie. But just like I was saying before that there are many great recipes for chocolate chip cookies, I also don't want to dictate to you how you should have your chocolate chip cookies. If you like a crispy chocolate chip cookie, just bake them a little longer. The flavors in this recipe are going to still thrill you. And if you want the chewy factor, then just take them out of the oven when the center is still a little soft. So I've brought them out on my rack. I've let it cool a little bit. Now, look at this. Can you see the difference? It's so obvious. These four are the ones that we added the extra chocolate chips to on the top, the ones that we styled a la food stylist. And then these two were just as is. It's not that these are going to taste any less delicious, but look, you know, first we eat with our eyes. Look how amazing those cookies look, and it really just took a moment to add the extra chocolate chips, and that's something that kids could help with, absolutely, that step. So look at this cookie. Oh, it's still warm. They're perfect. Chewy on the inside. I have a little bit of that crispy, the crispy edges where they're a little more browned, and everything that we did, the blend of the flours, the rest in the refrigerator, the really delicious 60% chocolate chips, and then the size of the cookie and not over baking all came together to make this really delectable chocolate chip cookie. I hope this was helpful. This will be a chocolate chip recipe to add to your repertoire, and you can find this recipe and many others at Bakepedia.com.